This podcast is brought to you by UPS. Now one of the world's largest package delivery companies, UPS started out as a small business too, so they have the expertise and experience to make international shipping easy for your business. Find out more at www.ups.com/SMB.
Hello and welcome to Small Business Snippets, the podcast from smallbusiness.co.uk. I'm your host, Anna Jordan. Today we have Will Butler-Adams, Managing Director of Brompton Bikes. He started at Brompton in 2002 as a project manager, moved up to engineer director and decided to take on the role of MD when a rival company was going to buy the company out in 2008. After making some changes, production sped up and Brompton now sells 55,000 bikes per year, with key markets in the UK and China. A UK-based Brompton bike hire scheme was launched in 2011 as well. Outside of the firm, Butler-Adams is a fellow at the Institute of Mechanical Engineers and the Royal Geographical Society, as well as the City and Guilds of London Institute. He's also a member of the British Manufacturing and Consumer Trade Advisory Group, consulting on post-Brexit trade deals outside the EU. We'll be discussing what it's like to take over a business from its founder and how to maintain brand loyalty. Hiya, Will.
Anna, good morning.
How are you?
Well, very lucky in the current climate as we are seeing some really, really challenging times, both emotionally and also commercially for many people globally. It's a pretty unprecedented time and we are finding ourselves as a business in one of the few sectors that has benefited from the current crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you're in the factory right now.
Yeah, I'm in the factory. We've traded non-stop throughout from the very first lockdown, and that has come with all sorts of challenges. But funnily enough, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, no doubt, the bicycle is a very, very useful tool in a situation like this. And there has been this sort of global enlightenment to the value of something so humble as a bicycle. So, we've contributed in our own peculiar way to trying to help people through this crisis.
Well, I will start a little bit further back from here. When you bought the company way back in 2008, you made a generous valuation estimate and you bought out the founder Andrew Ritchie's controlling stake in the company. Some might see that as quite a bold strategy. Why did you go for it at the time?
So I joined the company in 2002. There were about 30 of us, and initially I just thought I was going to muck about with a mad inventor making what looked like a fun and interesting product, not much more than that. And in 2 or 3 years I'd move on. I was pretty young at 28. But the bike got under my skin and it affected my life. I wasn't naturally an urban liver, and yet I had such fun living in London with this bike because it gave me this freedom. And I saw it had a similar, quite profound effect on our customers. And that's very alluring, in some respects addictive. So I was consumed by the company, entirely consumed by it. And Andrew, the inventor, is an absolute flipping genius, but he's not a builder of a business because he is much more of a complete megalomaniac, detail, engineering, right down in the nitty gritty. We're both engineers, but I'm more of a vision, empowerment, and sort of grow engineer. And I wanted, by the time we got to 2008, in fact 2006-07, I wanted to commit my life to the product he'd invented, but I couldn't do it if he still had control. And so it was a question of, the reality is, even if he'd made me the MD back then, I wouldn't have had the control I needed to do what I needed to do because I knew I needed to do things that he wouldn't approve of. So he had to let go of control. Didn't mean I was then taking control because I never did. I just took out his controlling stake. But it then meant I had authority and autonomy to do what I knew needed to happen to the business for it to fulfill its potential.
Were there signs particularly that he may have been getting to the point where he was more willing to give over some of the control? Because from what I've read, he was quite reluctant to delegate when he was in charge.
So, life isn't black and white, and it's full of moments in time and sort of people, and there's a certain amount of luck, and it's whether you see the opportunity or the luck floating by and whether you jump onto it. But in this particular case, I think it was a moment in time where Andrew was getting so caught up in the detail. And when a business gets to a certain size, if you're trying to control everything, you become the eye of the needle. and everything has to go through you. And you think that by recruiting people that you will find that then you have less work to do. But if you are the person who is controlling everything and everything has to come through you, by recruiting more people, you find you're even busier. And that's what happened to Andrew. He got busier and busier and busier, and it was making him not happy because he was putting himself under so much pressure. There was a sort of moment in time where he was not enjoying himself because the business was becoming so successful. And there was also, I was being more confident. And also in the early days, the company was owned by him and his friends weren't Andrews. They were entrepreneurial, independent business people in their own right. And they could see and bring perspective and support Andrew to make the decision because they could see there's no way he could continue because it wasn't his forte. So they helped him and encouraged him to let go. It's worth saying, on many occasions since then, he's vehemently regretted it because I'd done things, of course, which I knew I'd have to do that he didn't agree with.
So tell me, what kind of protestations did he have?
So it's about detail. And if you are an inventor, and Andrew is an inventor in the absolute sort of classic sense of the word. He spent 13 years, he hand drew thousands of drawings, technical drawings, not just for the bike, but how to make the bike. I mean, insane detail, something straight out of A Beautiful Mind. I mean, it's unreal that one human being could do what he did against a sort of backlog of everyone telling him he's, what are you doing, wasting your time, you've tried, you've failed, you're still at it, why are you still at it? So he wouldn't give up, but he would worry about training, worrying about tolerances, worrying about grammar, and would pick up on some problem, 6 pages deep in our website and ask me, how would I let this happen? And it's wrong. But on the grand scheme of things, when you're running a business and trying to do this and open up markets in Japan and an office in this and developing this, he assumed that I would know everything and check every piece of written word and that I'd signed off every detail. But it doesn't happen like that. You have to find people better than you. You need to trust them. You need to allow them to make mistakes, just not mistakes that will take out the business. But his perception is that I was running the business when it had 100 people or 200 people or 300 people or 400 people in the same way that he ran the business when it had 40, and that's just not possible. So that was the friction, and I mean, in some respects still is a friction, and in most cases everything Andrew said was technically correct, it just wasn't the priority. And the problem is, when you're running a business and you're growing at some speed, you actually have to walk past things that are wrong, and that's you're walking straight past something that is absolutely wrong, unacceptable, not right, but you have to leave it because there's an even bigger wrong over there. And you need to deal with the biggest. And it gives me huge pleasure that there are some things that I've been walking past for 8, 9, 10 years. And finally, we've got the breadth and the capacity as a business to finally address some of these things that have been bugging me. But if you get distracted by every minutiae as you're growing a business, you won't move the business forward because you'll never get to the most important thing that then allows you to then move on to the lesser things and as you build down through the priority list.
I think especially when you're starting a business, you're so used to playing all the roles that can be difficult to let go of.
But interestingly, in Brompton's case, when I joined, there were less than 30 people. So I was the person running the machines. I rolled my sleeves up and spent 3 weeks running machines. So the business was so small that is what I did. But that role has changed significantly. We now have offices around the world and we've got lots of people and I'm really doing nothing. And that's a really tough call to design yourself out of a job because there is no operational control in my role.
Speaking of internationally, you probably saw this coming, but I'd like to talk a bit about Brexit. We're about a week and a half in now, and it's been chaotic, in a word, especially for exporters. I think, as somebody who has worked to advise on trade deals and who wants to grow their market in other parts of Europe, especially for small business exporters, what do you think the forecast is for them, say, the next 3 to 5 years? Will things get better?
So what I would say, and this is not entirely directly answering your question, but indirectly it does. When you're in business, you need to focus on things that you can control. So you can control who you employ, you can control the culture of your organization, how you present yourselves, and what you do to inspire your team. What you can't control is FX. What you can't control is Brexit. So what you need to do is put in place strategies to mitigate the things that you can't control, to allow you to get back to focusing on the things you can control. What happened with Brexit was it started 4 years ago. We took a decision 4 years ago to plan for the worst case scenario. It took us about 3 months. The worst case scenario hasn't then changed in 3 3/4 years. It's still the worst case scenario. So for the last 3 3/4 years, we focused on growing our business, innovating, distribution, communication, and we've doubled the size of our business. But what I saw over Brexit was many businesses got so caught up in worrying about something that they couldn't control that they didn't do anything. They stagnated, and they were worrying about, well, the latest rumor is this. Oh my God, but I've heard it's that. But maybe it's this. Oh, it could be this. And I think in business, you need to not get distracted by things you can't control. Focus on your core, focus on your added value, and manage the things you can't control by putting in place strategies to minimize the risk.
I suppose the difficulty for small business owners is that they're so accustomed to planning ahead, but without a lot of concrete information, that's been difficult to do.
I'm not sure I agree. With a small business, you're more flexible than a bigger business. You're much more nimble. You have a tremendous advantage against some of the bigger players because you can adjust and you're smaller. So I think it's not straightforward, but it is possible to be able to try and mitigate those risks. And there aren't that many of them. Clearly, Brexit is one, FX is another, trade tariffs is a third, but there aren't that many, and there's some good advice out there to support you.
I know that Brompton has been open about being against planned obsolescence, where a company will manufacture a product so that it's unusable after a couple of years, which is long enough where somebody has long enough to develop a connection with the product, but not so short that they get disengaged from the company and they will buy from them again. There's regular income for that company. Phones, especially, are notorious for this practice. My question to you is that if a customer is only going to buy one Brompton bike for life, how do you maintain brand loyalty from customers?
So the way you maintain brand loyalty from customers is to give them a product that they only need to buy one in their life. Capitalism has done some amazing things. It's brought people out of poverty, it's brought health, it's brought education, but it has come at a cost, and it's come at a cost to our planet. And certainly in the last 50 years, increasingly. So we have to rethink how we engage with consumerism and how we buy things and how we reuse things and don't just buy and just chuck away and just we are sucking value out of our planet, which our planet can't sustain. And so apart from the fact that the customer much prefers a product they've had for a long time, if you've got I don't know, some pots and pans that came from your granny or your parents or an old jacket or anything that's had longevity, you cherish it because it's given so much to you. And if you can keep it working for as long as is possible, that makes total sense to me. And in coming back to brand loyalty, there are things we can do to engage with our customers where they're having fun. We do races all around the world, not in the last 12 months, but we do activities, we do events, and we want people to have fun. And we're only making this year, with a fair wind, we'll make 70,000 bikes. I mean, there are like 8.5 billion people in the world, of which nearly over 50% live in cities. I mean, we haven't even started. The opportunities are immense. And, so we want to create things. And then actually what we want to do is when it's finished, which we're not at yet, we should be able to take the product back, recycle it, and start all over again and have a full circular economy.
Is that something that you're planning to do in future?
Definitely. We need to do that because there will come a point where the bikes that we were making 20 years ago, in some cases 15 years ago, have come to the end of their life. At which point, for those bikes, we should be able to bring them back, take them apart, recycle it, and round we go again.
Today's opportunities for your business are borderless. As a global shipping provider, UPS is here to help your business capitalise on growing local and international markets and reach new customers across its global network. Find out more at www.ups.com/SMB.
I've read that your marketing budget isn't huge either.
Yes, and I think the experience that a customer has with your product, too often businesses are obsessed with selling you something, but that's not how you build a brand. A brand isn't what you feel when you bought it. Well, you can buy anything, and the moment you buy it, you have this sort of rush of, ooh, whoopee, isn't this fantastic? The question is, go back to that same customer in 2 years' time and say, that 100 quid you spent or that 300 quid you spent, was it worth it? And actually, sadly, in most cases, they go, I don't even know why I bought it. I've never blooming used it. Or, yeah, it was brilliant for about 6 months. And then, then it bust or something went wrong. Or, there aren't that many things that we absolutely cherish and love. And, so I think the scope for us to be delivering a useful product, it's not just about buying, it's about looking after the customer for the life of the product, because things need looking after, which is why we have put a lot of energy, if you like, our marketing budget goes into looking after the customers we already have. That's the most effective marketing budget, because if the customers that you have really love their product, and when things go wrong, which they do, we look after them as best we can, then that's the best marketing you can get. So spend your money on warranty, on customer service, customer support. And then when that's all perfect, you might have a little bit left over for doing some proactive marketing. But look, often people, they forget about the customer they've got, and they just want to go out and do this trendy, get more new customers rather than forgetting about those ones they've already got.
To round off, I'd like to talk a little bit about manufacturing in the UK, because for a long time now it's sort of dwindled, but then others have said, oh, well, the UK is still very innovative and it's still a very strong player in the manufacturing industry. In your view, where do you see it going in the next few years?
So I think there is so much potential to manufacture in the UK, simply because the barriers to entry to doing efficient, lean manufacturing are so much lower than they used to be. So when I was at university, which is increasingly becoming quite a long time ago,
Oh, I know the feeling.
yeah, the if you wanted to design something like a car, you needed a computer that filled up a room, and they cost, in today's money, millions of pounds. So the only companies that could afford the technology to allow you to design effectively were the Fords or the massive companies in the world. But you can buy a computer and start doing 3D design. You can get things printed in 3D, in metal. So if anything, manufacturing's become entrepreneurial again. Because if you come up with an idea, if you can design it, you can print it, you can prove it, you can go onto social media, and then you can raise the money to get started. There's so much potential, and the real sense of pride comes from the reason it's so satisfying in manufacturing. You see you're creating something. It's that sense of creation. It's like growing plants. You're seeing something happen and come up alive in front of you, and you're creating something tangible. That's really satisfying. And we've been encouraged and told that everything's on a computer and it's all noughts and ones, but actually with this sort of innate sense of pride about something tangible that's going out the door. So I think actually the opportunities for, not just in the UK, globally, for manufacturing doesn't need to be where there's cheap labour. Manufacturing is where there are the best ideas, and robotics, semi-automation, 3D printing, the cost of software and the ability to design is meaning the best ideas could sprout anywhere in the world, and you can manufacture locally where the brains are.
So it would be a bit like, since the rise of social media and blogging, we've seen content creation go more into the individual's hands. You feel like manufacturing can go from larger companies into individuals' hands.
Definitely, and it's a really positive thing, because disruption. I mean, you think about, if you look at things about flying taxis. There are people coming up. There are like 50, 60, 100 different companies around the world, all coming up with their different flying taxis. It's unthinkable 25 years ago, because it just wasn't possible for small businesses or small groups of individuals to try and come up with something so revolutionary. It would only be, unless Ford did it or Nissan or something, forget it. But yet all these startups are doing it, because the whole engineering and manufacturing has been broken down, and it makes it much more accessible. And if your idea is strong enough, and if your passion burns bright enough, you can do it.
Well, on that rather inspirational note, I'll leave it there. But thank you ever so much for coming on the podcast, Will.
And it is my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
You can find out more about Brompton Bikes at brompton.com. You can also visit smallbusiness.co.uk for articles on business succession and international trade. Remember to like us on Facebook at Small Business Experts and follow us on Twitter at Small Business UK, all lowercase. Until next time, thank you for listening.